All right. Hello, everyone. So glad to be here today. We are going to talk about building and leading remote teams. Today, the world of work is changing dramatically. And as we are learning how to work together remotely, work together while not physically in the same room, there's a few different tips and tricks that you can use to really drive success and to drive success within your teams and within your organizations. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that all remote teams are not made equal. All remote teams are a little bit different. See, there's actually three of remote teams. There are globally remote teams, meaning that we have people from all over the world. My name is Amber VANDERBURG, and we have people at the Pathways Group, which is my company, literally from all over the world. We are a globally remote team. We have domestically remote teams, meaning teams that are in the same regional area. And then you have hybrid remote teams. These are people that spend some time in the house, sometime in the office. And it's important to keep in mind what type of remote team that you have as you are creating policy, as you are setting expectations, and as you are preparing to work within your team. See, not all remote teams are made equal. And the difference between a hybrid remote, a globally remote, or a domestically remote team are going to have different challenges, and they're going to have different areas of true strength as well. So we want to keep this in mind at the forefront of our mind as we are applying these different into our teams. Now, let's talk about building a remote team. What should we be looking for in our ideal remote team player? Is there something different that we should be looking for in a remote team player versus a brick and mortar team player? Are there different questions that we should be asking? One of my favorite authors, Patrick Lencioni, writes that the ideal team player actually has three major factors, three major strengths within him or her. And these three major facets can really help determine the idealness of a team player. Now, these three ideas can apply to both in-person and remote. But I'm going to take these three ideas and really apply them specifically to how they make a big difference in remote teams. See, the ideal team player, whenever you are building your team, beginning a project, whenever you're looking for team players to come onto your project or into your organization, the ideal team player is humble, is hungry, and is smart. Is humble, is hungry, and is smart. Let's break this down just a little bit. The ideal team player is humble. In a remote team, especially, there is a greater opportunity for miscommunication. There's an opportunity for misunderstandings. There is an opportunity to continuously learn, to continuously adapt to new technologies and new ways of work. And the last thing that we want is a big ego getting in the way of a trainable team member. And so we want to seek a team member that is humble. Ask questions specifically about a time whenever they had a miscommunication and how they handled that. Ask them about a time in which they were trained in a new skill. Ask them about a time in which they exemplified humility within a team. You also want to seek a team member that is hungry. Now, a hungry team member is someone with a big appetite, though they might have a big appetite. We're looking for someone that has drive, that is self-driven, and can take ownership within their teams. We want to seek someone that is hungry, especially in a remote team. You as a team leader, the last thing you want to do is wonder if the person that is on your team is actually doing the job that they have agreed to do, or if they're just sitting at home. We want someone that we have confidence that they are hungry, that they are self-driven, self-motivated, and that they can truly have the drive and take ownership to get the job done. So ask questions very specifically about something in which they have taken ownership, something in which they have driven success. Lastly, you want to look at someone that is smart. Now, smartness doesn't necessarily mean IQ. Smartness actually means a high EQ. And especially in a remote team, having emotional intelligence and having the ability to be a great team player is critical for team success. See, right now, more than ever, it's important that we have empathy, that we have intentional relationship building skills. We're not physically in the same place, and so we must have a high level of EQ and a level of smartness as a team player to truly get the job done. So whenever you are building your team and seeking the ideal team player in a remote team, remember, look for someone that is humble. Look for someone that is humble, that is hungry, and that is smart. And these three ideas can really guide and drive success within your team. Now, many times, this is how we build our teams, and these are the things that we should be looking for within our remote teams. But what do we do whenever we are already within a remote team? How do we lead success and drive success in those situations? Well, I'm reminded of a time whenever I was working with more of a hybrid remote team in Bangalore, India. See, I went to become the only American, the only female, the only Christian, and the only blonde academy football coach or soccer coach for the Adidas Game Day Academies and Paris Saint-Germain PSG Academies in Bangalore, India, to coach widely the first generation of athletes on both an elite and a grassroots level. I coached about a dozen teams, mostly boys with a few girls, ages 6 to about 16. And as I got off the plane, I discovered that our team was operating under a very strict command-obey dynamic. See, oftentimes our players would come to session and they would stand in a line, kick a ball, wait for instruction. They would come to session and they would stand in a line, kick a ball, wait for direction. And while this may have been an efficient way to teach a skill, in a game scenario, it was a disaster. Oftentimes, our players, within the course of a match, would kick the ball exactly the way that we taught them. And then, before it was over, they'd turn to the sideline to the coach for further direction. See, they had mastered the task, but they didn't quite understand how to apply the game scenario. Well, it might be easy to think of this as a foreign academy in sports. How often do we go to work, receive tasks, and wait for instruction? And we do that over and over again. We go to work, we receive a task, we wait for instruction. And in this scenario, we may know the task, but it's important that we understand how it applies to the overall game scenario. And in a remote team, it can be very tempting to come into work or log into work, see the task, complete the task, and not understand how it applies to the overall game scenario within a team. So, in order to transform our team, we didn't make a dramatic overhaul of our communication. We actually did a slight shift. And so, we clearly communicated our what and our why. And then we allowed opportunities for ownership within the how. We clearly communicated our what and our why, and we allowed opportunities for ownership within the how. In application in football, it looked a little something like this. Rather than stand in a line, kick a ball, wait for instruction, we provided challenges. So from here, kick the ball to knock down those 3 cones. Because in order to do that, you're going to have to kick with power and precision. And in a game scenario, whenever you pass, whenever you kick, whenever you shoot, you're also going to have to kick with power and precision. And see, from here, we clearly communicated our what and our why. And then we allowed opportunities for ownership within the how. And so our players were able to clearly see what we were doing, why it was important. And then they also had a sense of ownership. And clearly identifying what the desired outcomes of your team performance is critical for team success. Many times, especially in remote teams, there can be some ambiguity of what is expected within the team. And so this is where I'm going to really look at the rest of the speech of 3 major areas of clarity that we can provide. And the first is to clarify expectations within your performance. So we're going to clarify our expectations. By clearly communicating that what and that why. Now, the example that I gave within football was very specific on how we were kicking the ball. I encourage you to get even more specific so that you can get strategic. We do this on a large scale level. At the beginning of every week, our globally remote team meets and we ask the question, at the end of this week, success will be defined as ... And we will clearly define what our goals are for the week and why that applies to our overall mission of our team and of our company. And so on a very high level, we have this conversation on a weekly basis. But at the beginning of a project, whenever we're coming into a new remote team, we actually get even more specific on clarifying expectations, meaning what are our expectations for how quickly emails will be responded to? What are our expectations for arriving to meetings on time? What are our expectations for being intentional in building relationships and going beyond work jab and work conversation? Now, these expectations can differ from team to team to team. We actually were working with one team that there were some team members that were accustomed to coming to meetings just a few minutes late because the team that they were in previously, that was their norm. That was the expectation that had been set. But in this team, in the new team, there was an expectation that they were going to all come in actually a few minutes early so that they could start the meeting on time. So this actually created a little bit of tension that could have been alleviated by having a proactive conversation and clarifying expectations within the team. So clarify what you're doing, why that is important, and then allow opportunities for ownership within the how. Many times, uncommunicated expectations are doomed to be unmet expectations. I'll say that again. Uncommunicated expectations, unclarified expectations are doomed to be unmet expectations. And so it's important that we actually clarify what is expected of our remote team players. We have remote team players that are humble, that are hungry, and that are smart. We've clarified the what and the why. We have clarified expectations, and now allow those opportunities for ownership for them to meet those expectations and truly perform. Now, we have identified the team player, we've clarified our expectations, and we know what performance is our standard within our team. But what do we do to actually implement and actually perform at a great level? So the next thing that we must do is clarify communication. This is an area that we'll stay for a minute. It's important to clarify communication within your team. See, whenever we gave the challenge to stand here and kick the ball to knock down those 3 cones, I saw some of the most heated debates I'd ever seen amongst 7-year-olds, trying to decide if the best way to kick the ball was with the input or with the laces. In reality, both ways were right. And so we were able to expand our toolbox of resources to complete our goals. And this is a really powerful lesson, especially seen in remote teams. There is a massive opportunity for miscommunication, for misunderstandings within any team, but especially within remote teams. And so it's important to clarify communication expectations within your team whenever you are beginning a project. One thing that I do at the beginning of a project, whenever I come into a new team, or whenever I take on a new client, is to engage in proactive conversations. Now, proactive conversations are a simple 5-minute conversation that goes a little something like this. At some point in this project, there's going to be tension. At some point in this working relationship, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be heat. I may let you down. And so while the emotions are low now, let us proactively discuss how we are going to handle that situation whenever it inevitably arises. And this does a couple really powerful things. First, it sets an expectation for conversation and for communication within your team. It's saying not only do we acknowledge that conflict does happen within teams, but we are actually expecting it. Many times team members, especially remotely, you're not actually seeing the people, maybe face to face every day, might avoid conflict because we don't want to admit that a problem exists or that conflict or tension exists within the team. But by having a proactive conversation, you're saying not only does it exist, we're actually expecting it to happen within our team. See, with opportunities for ownership creates a greater opportunity for a conflict, for tension, for heat. Beforehand, there was only one way to kick the ball. Now there's at least two. But opportunities for ownership also create an opportunity for conversations over complacency. And that's what we long to have, is conversations over complacency. So engaging in proactive conversations sets the expectation that tension may happen within teams, but rather than being complacent, we want to have these conversations to challenge the current norms that we have. The second thing that it does is really creates a script, creates a game plan that you can use to move forward. Sometimes people avoid looking at conflict and addressing conflict, addressing tension within the team, because there's a sense of ambiguity of how that conversation is going to go. Is the conversation going to be received? What are going to be the outcomes of a conversation like that? Well, by having a proactive conversation before anything even happens and while the emotions are low, you're creating a very specific game plan. I encourage you beyond, hey, if you feel tension, come and bring it up to me. No, I encourage you to actually act out and script out how that conversation is going to go. I've spoken with some teams that they have buzzwords that say, okay, if I say the word pickle, then that's a word that we know, okay, the tensions are getting too high. Maybe someone is overpowering conversation. I've worked with some teams, they've agreed to a thumb war if they engage in a disagreement, and they've already had this conversation. Most people, they get a little bit more into, okay, let's act out how the conversation is going to go. And so by having these proactive conversations, you're really setting up your team for great to have these conversations in a really powerful manner. There's actually different ways that you can assess and you can actually predict where team tension might lie within your remote team. a simple way that I do this, you can do this through personality tests. We have an entire catalog at the Pathways group that we use to assess team dynamics. But a quick 1-minute activity that I do is have a team pull out a 3x5 note card, and on the front part of the card, write areas in which I feel really strong, areas in which I provide value to the team. And then on the other side of the card, write areas in which I really hope that there's somebody else on the team that has this strength. I'll give you an example. On the front side of my card, I write that I am a big vision type of person. I can see the forest. I can cast the vision. I can drive the team. But on the opposite side of the card, I write that I really hope that there is somebody on the team that is extremely detail oriented and that is great with follow through. Might be good at getting the ball started, but I really hope that there's somebody on the team that can see all of the details that I will probably miss. And from here, we actually are clearly identifying areas in which we will complement one another. We need one another to truly round out the team. But we're also clearly identifying areas in which there might be conflict. And so our proactive conversation is extremely specific on where those areas of tension might lie. And we're being very proactive from the beginning to set forth a game plan moving forward. And conversations like these can really help to alleviate one of the greatest barriers to performance feedback and communication within teams. And that is the fundamental attribution error. Now, the fundamental attribution error, especially within remote teams, is really just a fancy way of saying that too often we judge other people by their behaviors and we judge ourselves by our intentions. We see this played out on the road whenever we're driving all the time. See, if I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off, then obviously they're a horrible driver. They didn't see where they were going. They're completely inconsiderate. They need to have their license taken away. What were they thinking? This is horrible, right? But if I unintentionally cut somebody off on the road, then I didn't see my exit coming up. I was simply trying to merge and I didn't see them. And I began looking at what I intended to do while I was looking at somebody else's action. We see this within developers all the time, right? Of who looking at the actual behavior versus intention. We see this in life every single day. And within a remote team where we're not all in the same place, the fundamental attribution error, it can be really critical because we are not seeing the entire picture. We don't see everything that's going on in the home or in the workplace. So it's easy to look at the behavior and not the intention. And an easy way that we can overcome the fundamental attribution error is through a simple question. What was your intention whenever you were trying to do that? What were you intending to do? I was working with a remote team a few months ago, and we had a team member that would come to meetings and was seen as very abrupt, seen as very abrasive. Some even said malicious. The team dreaded this team member coming to meetings. And so I asked the question, what is your intention whenever you are speaking at meetings? And his intention was to be passionate, was to be persuasive. And so from here, we had a knowledge gap between the perceived behavior and the intended behavior. And by asking the question, what was your intention? We actually were able to approach the conversation and approach the performance feedback from more of a coaching standpoint to bring the two closer together. We actually were able to partner with the individual to help improve the behavior and to alter the behavior rather than recommending or policing the behavior. We actually were able to partner and to coach with the individual. And this was a much better dynamic within the team. And the entire dynamic changed simply by asking the question, what was your intention? What were you trying to do? So we want to clarify expectations. We want to clarify our communication internally within the team. And lastly, we want to clarify leadership within our team. In a remote team, it is important that team members know what is expected of the leaders within their team and within their organization. Where do you go if you do have team tension? Or where do you go if you have, if we have a question, if there are tools that are needed? What is expected of leadership within the team? So knowing what is expected of leaders is really critical, and clarifying that leadership role, especially in a remote team, is so important to provide that clarity and to provide that clarity to really alleviate any ambiguity of who to go to as far as leadership is concerned within the team. But you also want to clarify leadership in terms of performance feedback. See, there's a huge question of how much should we be checking in on our team members? Now, this does checking in, meaning having one-on-one conversations, checking in with the team, and actually providing that direction and clarifying that what and that why, and providing opportunities for ownership within the how, driven by the leadership throughout a remote team. Now, this can vary a little bit from team to team, and so it is critical that leadership actually know the team members within their organization to be aware of how to adjust depending on the team members' preferences. So first and foremost, actually with the team is absolutely critical. There is formal feedback and informal feedback that is informal feedback. According to recent studies, informal feedback is desired amongst millennials and Gen Z. You can imagine that could be more or less depending on the dynamic of your team, but twice a week of a check-in minimum. That could be more, could be less, but twice a week is the general desire for an informal check-in, informal feedback within your team, twice a week. Formal feedback is going to look a little bit different. Right now, having that clarity in your what and your why is going to be so important. And so having twice a week informal feedback, and then looking at either bi-monthly or quarterly formal feedback in performance is critical. This allows a platform and an opportunity for leaders to provide more direction how team members are doing what and the why, how they are performing, and then also provide feedback and a game plan on how to move forward to continuously improve as well. Having an opportunity to train up your leaders while you are remote is so important and can really provide a guideline for continued success within your team, where our goal is not simply to perform as a team. Our goal is to thrive as a remote team. And so by clarifying your expectations, your communication, and your leadership, you can actually be in a position to truly truly engage and to truly improve your performance. Last story of the day. See, I've talked a little bit about my time in India. Whenever I was coaching, I recall there was one day that I had a young lad named Achintya. Now, Achintya was 6 years old, and he was so excited for his first day of football. He actually came running out onto the field and he began yelling, "Pass! Pass! Pass!" And I noticed that Achinthia was yelling pass even whenever the other team had the ball. And Achinthia was yelling pass even whenever he was miles away from the action. And Achinthia was yelling pass even whenever he had the ball. And so he was running with the ball, yelling, "Pass, pass, pass!" And so I looked at Achinthia and I said, "Achinthia, why are you yelling pass?" And he looked up at me and he said, "Miss Mom, I do not know what it means. I only know it is a football word." Today we've discovered and today we've discussed a lot of different skills, from what types of different remote work there is to what we should look for in building our remote team, in clarifying our expectations and our communication and our leadership. And sometimes it can be a little bit easy to sound like my friend Achinthia, yelling, "Performance feedback, proactive conversations, clarifying the what and why, humble, hungry, smart, performance feedback, we got this." Because we know these are really big words that can lead to really big goals. But if we're in the wrong position, if we're miles away from the action, or even if we have the ball and we don't know in which direction we're going, then saying these words is not only ineffective, but it's actually detrimental to the overall communication within your team. But if we first take the time to build a high-performing team by seeking people that are humble, that are hungry, that are smart, if we begin our projects and begin our team conversations and relationships by clarifying expectations within our performance, within the communication, within the team dynamics, within what is expected of you as a team member and as the team. If we take the time to clarify our communication by having proactive conversations, assessing team dynamics, being able to address unmet performance expectations in a healthy manner by being cognizant of the fundamental attribution error and really partnering with people to improve performance. And if we clarify leadership by continuously building talent and growing talent within our team, then we will be in a position to yell pass, to receive the ball, to move forward, and to score really big goals. Thank you all so much for having me here today. I do have a couple minutes left. If anyone has any questions on how to build and lead remote teams, I'd love to answer. Also, I have my Twitter here. I am the only Amber Vanderburg on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. So I would love to connect as well. So I would love to connect as well. I am from the Pathways Group, and we work with teams all over the world, helping them perform a little bit better globally, remotely.